I think 16 and 17-year-olds should be able to vote. They're old enough to marry, to join the armed forces, to start working and paying taxes.
Personally, I have not yet been persuaded that votes for 16 and 17-year-olds is the right approach.
The average 16 or 17-year-old doesn't give a flying fig about politics. You're only talking to ones who are motivated.
That's
absolutely true.
And do you know
And this is a decision that is going to affect the future of their lives.
For many people, the idea of 16 and 17-year-olds voting is a pretty scary thought, but in reality, it's not too far away. In this documentary, we're going to take a look into whether 16 and 17-year-olds should be able to vote.
Question for the new Prime Minister.
In the 2017 general election, there was a huge youth surge for Labour. Many feel this is because they focus their policies on the youth of the country. One lady who supports this is MP for Birmingham Yardley, Jess Phillips. Jess Phillips is pretty well known for being widely outspoken. She's very strong to what she believes in. And we travelled to Acox Green to see her offices and to see herself, to hear what she had to say about this topic. Obviously, your voting record shows that you're very in favour of 16 and 17-year-olds having the right to vote. But why do you think it is important that this age group has the right to vote?
I think that for lots and lots of different reasons, I meet brilliant young people in that category every single week of my working life. And I cannot understand why people are frightened of them being able to express their opinion in our democracy. So I don't have any fears that people aren't educated enough, people aren't interested in enough, because that just isn't the evidence that I see. I see apathy and disinterest in 16 and 17-year-olds just as much as I see it in everybody else who can vote. So I don't think that the arguments against stack up. We make decisions in Parliament every single day that will affect the lives of young people, every single day. And we make decisions that won't come to fruition for many years. So if you think of things like High Speed Rail 2, we've been talking about that for bloody donkey's years. We make decisions about all the stuff at the moment around Brexit. None of that will come to fruition for a good few years, and by that point the people whose lives it will actually affect won't have been able to vote, and that just doesn't seem fair to me.
You say you're not worried about people, 16, 17-year-olds not being educated. Do you reckon they have enough life experience though to make a sound decision? For example, with Brexit, younger people haven't lived outside the EU, whereas older generations will have lived outside the EU.
I think the life experience thing is an interesting argument, because actually the life experience of young people now is completely different to what it was like to be 16 and 17, even just when I was 16 and 17. So to say that their own individual life experience somehow doesn't stack up to being the same as if you've lived longer, decisions are made about those people's lives in Parliament. So why on earth wouldn't we let them be the people who had a say on that? I used to work in a domestic violence charity before I was in Parliament, and I met 16 and 17-year-olds who had had the kind of life experiences that almost nobody in Parliament could understand. There is a wealth of experience out there, and if we say, well, you've never had the life experience of being a soldier, so you can't vote on matters of war and peace, you've never given birth, so you can't vote on maternity services. If we're going to have a granular argument like that, politicians are really brilliant at being arrogant enough to think that their life experiences are the only one, and to suggest that about 16 and 17-year-olds, that they don't have a life experience. They have the life experience of being 16 and 17, which we all make decisions on, so it doesn't stack up in my view.
What would you say to the idea and the argument that young people are too easily led by trends and not policies? For example, we had Jeremy Corbyn in the general election this year. I have a lot of mates myself who aren't that invested in politics, but it was almost like fashionable to be a Labour supporter. But they couldn't really process the idea of a manifesto, what the manifesto meant, what the pros and cons are. Do you reckon young people are too easily led by trends and not policies?
I think that if you were to find me even 1,000 people in Birmingham who'd actually read all of the manifestos and made their voting decision based on the manifestos, I would give you a medal. To say that 16 and 17-year-olds are the only people guilty of that, I didn't read all of the party manifestos. I believe in people. I believe in people's own intelligence to take on the information and make the decision based on what their needs are, what their families' needs are, their community's needs are, and with the information that they are given. To say that 16 and 17-year-olds are all just following some sort of, conga to the tune of "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn" is to basically undermine their own opinions. Maybe they just like him.
%60% of 18 to 24-year-olds voted for Labour, which was part of a 72% overall turnout from the same age group. I've always been interested in how the age of 18 is suddenly your coming of age. So on the day before your 18th birthday, you're not mature enough, but in the space of 24 hours, things change. I'm about to speak to a millennial who has a contrasting view to the majority of this age group. So I want to chat to someone now who I met at a documentary recently on the BBC where they discussed Generation Z and the stereotypes, which include a lot about politics. This guy's called Declan James. He's a comedian and a presenter, and he's got some a pretty good take on this topic. Right, so hi Declan, how you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. So, first of all, what is your thoughts on the idea maybe of a 16-year-old being able to vote?
I'd sort of oppose the idea of a 16-year-old and 17-year-olds voting because they are quite sort of single-track minded. I speak from experience. Obviously, I was at one point a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old, so this is not sort of I'm against it. But obviously, we are all growing up, so therefore you can tell that when you was that age, you don't have a well enough understanding in terms of overall aspect to appreciate, if that makes sense.
No, of course. So if many people would say that, you can pay tax, you can get married, you can join the armed forces, but you can't choose who sends you to war. So what would you say to someone who thinks this is unfair?
Well, as strange as it might seem, I'd sort of want them to answer me when they're 30. Well, they do stuff when they then may regret later in life. So therefore, you can appreciate stuff when you're older. That only now I'm still appreciating more and more as I get older. You understand how it works better. If you was maybe taught it in school, the educational system taught how to vote and why it's important and everything like this from such a young age, then you wouldn't have such of a problem.
Right, I get what you mean. Do you maybe think if it was something that was implemented into the curriculum, even from an early age at primary school, that your idea, your stance on this would be a little bit different?
I'd say more than a tiny bit. I would be very, very strongly minded towards. I wouldn't see a reason why not to then.
Well, Declan, it's something you're obviously very passionate about, but of course, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
During the research for this documentary, we asked people at home to get involved and give us their thoughts on the question of 16 and 17-year-olds being able to vote.
My name's Luke, and what I believe is that 16, 17-year-olds should not be able to vote in general elections. I think this is down to the fact that many people aged 16, 17 don't really understand who their MPs are, what their MP does for their constituency, and who else is sort of fighting for votes in that constituency. I don't think young people are very aware of their local politics. They're very focused on the main candidates.
16 to 17 year olds should be able to vote because we know what we want and we're very aware of agendas and our future. So I believe it is our right to be able to vote what happens in our country, even at such not really a young age.
I believe the age of voting should not be lowered to age 16. I believe it should remain age 18, i.e. you cannot vote in an election until you are an adult in the eyes of the law. And the main reason I believe this is because you cannot stand for election as an MP or a councillor unless you are 18 years old. Therefore, I believe it is entirely appropriate that people who are able to vote in such an election should be of an age where they could stand as a candidate should they want want to.
But I also think that young people should be able to vote in referendums. I think 16 to 17-year-olds definitely should be able to vote in referendums as long as they understand the issue.
The next person I'm going to speak to is strongly against this idea. So I've already interviewed Jess Phillips, who's on the pro side of 16 and 17-year-olds being able to vote. But today is a pretty special day because in Parliament today, the bill for the representation of the people is going through. It's having its second hearing. So we're going to meet Caroline Spelman, who's from the Conservatives and is the Conservative MP for Solihull, to talk about what her views are on this subject. The question of 16 and 17-year-olds being able to vote is certainly a controversial topic. It's very relevant today when we're talking, because of course we've had the Representation of the People Bill, which is having its second reading today. Previously in 2015 there were 4 votes lowering the voting age for various reasons. On all occasions we saw that you voted for it to remain at 18. Just give your thoughts on why that is.
Well, because I ask my constituents what they want, so I do go and speak to sixth forms on a regular basis, and at the end of a really good chat about a whole range of political issues, I just ask them by a show of hands whether they would want the voting age reduced below 18, and there's never a clear majority for that. So it's basically informed by my own constituents.
Do you think that's because there isn't an interest in politics with young people?
Well, I ask them, because what you must do in politics is listen to your constituents. You know, why wouldn't they want the voting age reduced, those that don't want it? And it's say they don't understand it well enough, because unless you're actually studying politics in school, actually to those who are not studying it, there's not a great deal of teaching or explanation about what it's about, and that's the reason they give me why they don't want it reduced below the age of 18.
So do you think politics being introduced into education, do you reckon that would be a good step to make?
I certainly do, and other countries do it, and I don't know why we're so squeamish about it here. I think perhaps, teachers were worried that teaching everybody about politics, they might be open to a criticism that they were influencing a child's political thinking. But I actually think we need to be more grown up about that, and it's important as somebody matures and becomes an adult, and it is after all a process. One of the things you need to understand is the importance of exercising your vote.
Okay, thank you very much for talking to me.
Pleasure.
So I've spoken to both sides of the argument on whether 16 and 17-year-olds should be able to vote. The question is unanswered, but one thing we do know is that the debate will roll on for many years to come.